My name is Tom Johnson. I am a technical writer based in Seattle. I work at Google with APIs in vehicles and cars and so on. And all right, I'm going to talk about a cool thing that I've been doing for the last year and a half or so that I'm pretty excited about because it's been working so well. And I'm calling them API quick reference guides. And it started with a problem we were trying to solve. We had a lot of partners who would meet with product teams and so on, and they would really want to know um, the information that we're delivering in the API. They wanted to know different attributes and they wanted a lot of details. And we pointed them to the reference docs, which were a Java doc, but the Java doc was really hard to navigate. It's especially hard if somebody's not an engineer. You have to kind of know the right entry points to get into the full extent of what the API is providing. People wanted more of a kind of easy reference, some kind of list that they could see all the attributes. The problem is this wasn't just a simple list of data that was being returned. There are hundreds of different data elements in advanced complex structures, hierarchies, and so on. And trying to kind of pull that out of the reference never made sense because it was just like a lot of duplicate work. So we would try to help people navigate through the Java doc. But the problem with a lot of reference documentation is that they're just sort of stacks of tables. You have one table that says, okay, you get this object, and inside this object, there's another object, and we're going to define its contents in the next table down. And then that object has its own definitions that are referenced in another table. And pretty soon you just have like a giant list of tables. The order gets lost and people are scrolling up and down, and it's kind of a nightmare. So the solution we came up with after some trial and error was to build a comprehensive tree diagram that showed all the elements of the API, and not just show the elements, but actually link to them so that when a user clicks the link, they go right to the reference documentation description and other kind of details. This would avoid a lot of the duplication. And on the left, I have a sample. All this stuff is behind firewalls, so I can't really share it externally. So I had to make like a Jabberwocky sample, but you get the point here. This is just a very simple like text-based diagram, but it's got links in it that take people places. And you can see the structure and hierarchy. When we showed this to our partners, people really loved it. We initially tried it as an experiment and then started building them for more APIs. And now I've got one of these diagrams for every API that I support. And it seemed like it really solved the problem because people could use Ctrl+F to find the element. They could go to the docs, go back to the diagram, and so on. Partners had a way to, or product teams had a way to talk with partners about the API and what it was delivering and so on. And it seemed like it was really working well. In fact, I had a product manager just say he felt every API across our org should have this, and he thought they were the most popular pages. So he was very happy. Now, the problem was these are kind of hard to maintain. You can imagine if you have an API that's complex with hundreds of elements in a lot of different hierarchies and structures, doing it once, maybe it takes you a while and you get it, great. But now with every 2 weeks, if engineers are changing things, they're adding elements, they're deprecating elements, they're changing them around, and it's a constant like nightmare to maintain. Every time there's a release, I'm like, oh, we added this element. Okay, I have to go back into the diagrams and I have to change them, and they can be pretty complex under the hood. Well, here is where AI has really become helpful. The AI tools that we've started to use really excel at structured repetitive tasks like this. AI tools like Gemini, this is the main one that we use, are great at reading reference docs. They really can parse through reference information and understand it in ways that is impressive. Now, once I had I've constructed the whole diagram, I'm hesitant to just blow it away and regenerate it and so on each time. But I can focus in on different parts and have the AI tool update different like branches and sub branches and so on that I'm specifying. And it really does make it manageable. I don't think people would really try to do these API quick reference diagrams if all the updates were manual. This is one of those possibilities that people are often saying, hey, what will AI allow us to provide with API documentation that we couldn't do previously? Well, this could be one of those tasks. I think in general, if you're thinking about a complex task like this, where you want to create a tree diagram out of your API, you need a strategy. And I think approaching any complex task in simple phases or layers makes sense. Imagine if you're building a skyscraper, you wouldn't just build it from the ground up, finishing every floor as you go. You might start with the foundation, and then you maybe put in scaffolding, and then you maybe eventually get to electrical and plumbing and so on. And you can see if you had a really complex prompt or a complex task, you might even start with like the root structure and then add parts of it incrementally. And that's what I did initially when the AI tools weren't as good. And now as AI tools have progressed to agentic workflows, I can actually stack up the whole process into a single prompt. And on my site, let me just share where I have a lot of info. I'd rather be writing.com is my blog that most people know me from. And I've got a section called Docs plus AI. And this whole kind of presentation and info is in this API quick reference guides. I've got a sample prompt here that would walk people through how to kind of tell an AI tool to create one of these things. And you can read through it here. I used to have this separated out into like multiple steps. Then one day I thought, well, what if I could just throw it into a same prompt and maybe it'll figure it out? And it did. And it kind of blew me away. But you can see that the approach here really helps things along. If you provide an example, and then you provide your source, and you can do a lot with that. So check that out if you want to dig into the details. It really depends what your constraints are, what tools are available to you, but the agentic stuff is kind of really next level in my opinion. But no matter what tool you're using, the general pattern for creating these tree diagrams or quick reference guides is first you want to show an example tree that you want it to sort of imitate. I've got some examples in that post. Second, you want to define some rules. Think about how do you want methods to be represented or data types? How do you want a response to be flagged? What if you have a one of sort of condition? So any kind of diagram has certain conventions, and try to describe what you want. You could also reverse engineer those conventions from an existing diagram that you like, and then just pass that in. Third, you would provide the source, right? You want to provide your API reference docs. Now this seems like a really easy step, right? Maybe you just upload it into the context of your IDE, or maybe you've like consolidated all of them into a single file based on some script that you've written. But here's where the rubber meets the road in terms of AI tools, because you'll find out if your API exceeds 2 million tokens, or if it exceeds 1 million tokens, or whatever limit you're working with. Most of the APIs I work with are under 2 million tokens, but I've got one that is, or under 1 million tokens, but one that's like 1.5 million or something. So I have to go into like different tools. I'll often use Google AI Studio in the scenario, but basically pass in the source, and then finally give it the prompt to generate that output, and then try to verify its accuracy. All right. Now the second part, once you've built the representation of the API diagram, the second part is to link all these elements, and again, could be hundreds of elements, to the appropriate section in the reference documentation. And this, again, is a sort of Herculean feat. that the tool will often do with varying degrees of success, depending upon how clear the links are, perhaps in the reference docs. But if because the approach I've taken is to make all these diagrams text diagrams, it doesn't make a lot of sense to like put HTML directly in there, because you would have big wrapping issues. It would not work well. It would make the source completely unusable if things wrap there and you can't really work with it. So I recommend making each element a variable, define links for the variables. That's this lower screenshot here. It depends what platform you're using. This is just like Jinja syntax, but it would be common across many different doc platforms. And then in the same place where you pull in this tree diagram, you would obviously include the variable definitions below it so that the variables render as actual links and so on. So, I mean, it's a complex undertaking when you work out all the details, but fundamentally, you're just trying to make links in a diagram. Well, I found that beyond just usability and being a popular deliverable for users and other product teams, it also was very helpful for AI tools, because it provided me with a concise summary of my API that I could then use for many different tasks. The problem with so many of the prompts and other sort of AI sessions that we have is that we need to pass in the reference documentation as context in order to reduce hallucination, errors, improve factuality, and so on. But if your API reference is massive and your AI session chokes, or it's like you've given it 2 million tokens and now it's moving at a snail's pace, has to recrawl that whole like context for every question and so on, it's not gonna go well. But now with this API reference, you've got a much better approach, because you've got a summary of your entire API in a very structured way that a machine can read. You could take and supplement the API quick reference, the summary, with perhaps like a section that you're working with all the detail of that section. Like if you have an Acme feature that you're working with, and you could find that Acme feature in the reference and pass that into the API or into the AI session, and then add your entire tree diagram, you're still going to be way under the token limits of most tools. So it really is helpful. I found in my conversations with people about with tech writers about using AI tools with docs, the number one obstacle is issues related to errors and hallucination, the factuality category. That's the main obstacle, the main complaint, the main reason people push back. And the easiest way around that is to supply or to ground your AI sessions in a source of truth. And that source of truth is usually your reference documentation. So it becomes this all-important strategy for overcoming the biggest challenge with AI tools when using them to generate various documentation assets. They really reduce hallucination. If you try to kind of work with an AI tool without the context of the reference versus with the context, it can be vastly different. You're really providing a grounding that can indicate whether what you're even writing is correct, whether it matches the reference. And this is like the number one insight I've had in working with AI tools is if you ground them with the right information, the output is really pretty accurate. And if it's not, it could be that the source was faulty in some way. So in summary, these API quick reference guides really serve two users. You've got your end users, your developers, and other internal people who are benefiting because you've provided a visual one-page almost or single-page view of the API that provides a lot of, it boosts their comprehension, provides a lot of easy findability for every element. So it's a usability win, but it's also a great asset for providing into AI sessions as context because it expands so much of the factuality to any kind of session you're doing, that it becomes a tool that's just incredibly useful to have at your disposal. And that is pretty much it. Let me pull back over here and see if I've got any questions in the chat. All right. Somebody says, I love this. Oh, thank you, David. And
your presentation was crystal clear. And I love the generated images. Well, I guess they were generated.
Yeah, of course. I mean, who is creating them by hand these days?
Let's draw it. Yes. Do you see like just ideation? Do you see a 2 steps, 3 steps away application to the same logic that you just applied?
Oh, what do you? I don't know if I understand what you're asking.
So, if it's not APIs, but some other large body of documentation that travels as a set.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any large body of information is going to be key to be able to manipulate and use that. I mean, this is like the fundamental problem with AI tools, is that their context is limited. So whether you have whatever reference content or documentation you have, the goal is to really stuff it inside that session so that the AI tool is super aware. And of course, that's what like RAG is all about, and different kind of experiences for the end users. But like if you're working with content that's constantly changing, and you've got latest releases and latest builds and updates, and you want to manually control all that, being able to really grab all of that large body of content and somehow pass it in as context into whatever session you have is really the strategy that I follow for so much of my AI interactions.
And meanwhile, there is a question for the flip side. When would you not recommend this approach?
Well, if your API reference docs already really achieve all of this and it becomes redundant, I think some reference outputs are better than others. I mentioned that ours tend to be stacks of tables and so on, but I think other reference output can be a lot more attractive sometimes. So maybe users don't have this problem, or maybe you've got just developers as users and they never complain or never have this problem. Then it doesn't really make a tremendous amount of sense to go out of your way to create the deliverables. But yeah, it's self-beneficial as well, even if you're not generating something for an end user, to have something internally and to better understand the API is great. And the agentic prompt that I shared, like, it honestly takes a few minutes for it to run. Of course, I'm not disclosing all the different tools and approaches I'm using, but with a good agentic tool, it can do this in a matter of minutes, and so it's not a heavy lift. Checking that accuracy, though, can be a lot harder. Trying to find those 5% of cases where things aren't correct can be a lot of hassle. Let's see. Any tips on automating updates for the quick reference based on automated API updates? Yeah, I haven't got to that step where it could just automatically do it, but that is a great question. Do you create one large tree or multiple? Well, maybe make that call based on how complex it is. If it's, I actually just make one large tree for most APIs and let people scroll. People really want the Ctrl+F experience where they can find it. So if you have too many different pages or places to look, it can reduce that confusion. I'm sorry, it can create more confusion. Thanks again for listening to this. Again, if you want to know more, check out this read more link and my site. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Tom. And I hope I'm talking in everyone's name that this is a delight to hear you rather than just read you every week. So thank you for coming.
Thanks.